Good. Okay. Moving back to the northeast a bit, this is the Star Valley, incidentally, to give you more orientation. And I'm sorry if I go through this too fast and lose you. A lot of us have been doing this a lot long, so things are very familiar with us, but I'll try to keep you oriented within the state. And one thing I would note, NISA does a fantastic job of doing this, as you all will appreciate if you've ever tried to manipulate a computer in front of a crowd. But these polygons with the colors and so forth, she did these this morning before we met. We were planning to do this at 1 o'clock. The weather changed that. And I'm relying on the subgroup members. If we see an error, if we didn't get the color right or something like that, you know, we'll get it fixed. We may not have everything exact here because we haven't had a chance to review it. It's all brand new. This is bond rent up here, Hoback Rim. This is the divide between the Upper Snake River Basin or Jackson Local Working Group and the Upper Green River Local Working Group to the southeast. This is a relatively new lek that was discovered in recent years. Forest Service, again, this is why this looks strange. Those are Forest Service lands only. Forest Service made the proposal to have those be core. There was a radio-collared bird, or several radio-collared birds.
Those aren't them.
Those birds moved down into the Upper Green to winter north of Big Piney. There was majority, but not full consensus within the local working group to add that as core. Game and Fish in this case was the holdout. To not add this as core. The issues in this case were the isolation from this area. These birds are probably flying over the timbered habitat that is in here. It's an edge population. There were some arguments put forth that this could be connectivity to someplace else, but there's not data relative to that. So all things considered, our subgroup recommended that not be added to core, that it did not meet the criteria for being core. And that, I believe, was, I think everything we've talked about so far has been 100%.
And Tom, would like to know that was one that we said needed an automatic review next time.
Right, there are some of these that there just wasn't compelling information yet. There may be more to come, and this is one of those areas. I mean, if there's more documentation of how these birds move and so forth, maybe sometime down the line. And there are several of those, and I'll ask the subgroup members to point those out if I miss those as we go through the presentation. Okay, that is it for the Upper Snake, Jackson area.
Questions, comments on Upper Snake or local working group? Okay, I think that one has remained pretty much the same since the last time. Team, anything here? Okay, thank you.
Okay, moving to the Upper Green, we'll start in the real Upper Green. Proposal again from the Forest Service, similar, in fact, kind of part and parcel to this over in the Grovont. A proposal of connectivity. Somewhat goes back to the genetic paper that's come out that is mildly suggested that there may be some link across here, but we don't have documentation of birds actually doing it at this point. These are collar relocations. There's a new radio collar study going on up here. The Forest Service again ended their proposal at the Forest Service boundary. So if this proposal were to actually be accepted, to follow the logic of the proposal, you would want to close that line and connect it to existing core. There was public comment received on this Upper Green from the Upper Green River Cattlemen's Association in opposition to this proposal. The local working group was in consensus not to add this, as was this group. And again, seeking greater information, I would say, from the city group, seeking greater information that it was premature to do this at this point. From the local working group perspective, I think they looked at this as a lower priority. As you're going to see in a bit, there's a lot bigger issues going on there with a lot more birds. The local working group up there was concentrated on those bird values, not adding. And if you needed to adding birds that would reflect in the math of this whole exercise. There is, I think, one identified lek up here, new lek, but modest, very minor in terms of bird numbers.
Tom,
Yes.
clarify, the observations could be a single bird multiple times, or how many collared birds are we looking at there?
Okay. In some of these, we can get an idea by looking at some data. In a lot of the, like these are, I know are some GPS collars, so many of these points are going to be the same bird.
Yeah.
That takes a little bit of digging to actually answer that. We can give you a general idea, I think.
That's what I want, because I know sometimes people will look at a map like this and go, wow, that's a lot of birds. Well, it's not a lot of birds necessarily. It's one bird repeatedly.
Right.
Yeah.
They've got,
A dozen?
you know?
Yeah, I think it's about 8.
8 birds collared up there, so that's
And Dean,
At this point.
as a representative of the number of birds up there, is that 50%? Do you have a clue? I mean, you actually got most of those birds collared in the Upper Green, correct?
You
No.
know, another survey that they did with some dogs up in the area, just kind of flushing birds. I believe they came up with about 150 to 200 birds in the area.
In late season?
And kind of, that brood period, August.
Yeah, that's okay.
yeah, these were captured in August, not on the legs.
Right.
Yeah. So,
I just wanted to clarify that.
yeah. Okay, I think enough of that one. Moving to the south. And let's go along the forest. Let's keep going with the Forest Service proposals along the edge.
I didn't see which way you're going.
Doesn't matter, whichever side.
We'll do this one.
Okay, these are also Forest Service proposals. There you see the vegetation background. The yellow dots are locations during this spring, summer, and fall. The blue are winter observations. Existing core here. So these were isolated population, or not population, but areas. That and the lack of birds associated with it in terms of leks nearby was the reason that the local working group did not add these. There was a discussion relative to linking this based on these. This is a county road, and I'm assuming that those are, well, it's pretty obvious that those observations are a result of game and fish folks traveling that road and seeing sage grouse. Working group was in consensus not to add those, as was our group last night. And was this 100% as well? They did, however, this is a new LEC. This was a small distance from this new LEC to the edge of core. There was agreement last night by the group that that LEC should be have a greater buffer on it, and that is what is reflected there.
2 miles.
I'm sorry?
2 miles.
2 miles. So this is 2 miles from this LEC to the edge here. You've got the A doesn't mean, that just means that was a change.
That's my note. That's, I need to do something and that's why.
Okay. All right, we'll go to the other side of the basin. We'll continue on with the Forest Service. We're crossing the Green River Basin onto the west-facing slope of the winds. Here's Pinedale. You're going to see Fremont Lake pop up here in a second. There's Fremont. Okay, the green again is core. The Forest Service proposal were to add these areas that are adjacent to core into core, based on, again, their viability policy. The local working group, again, did not choose to recommend that addition due to the lack of documentation of bird use in those areas and not gaining birds. We had a little discussion last night that this purple line is what we consider the occupied habitat of sage grouse. You know, this looks like timber. So the at one time, I think the group was about to say, let's go ahead and do that. When they saw this, it's like, let's not, because that would be confusing relative to the habitat lines where grouse are meant to occur. So consensus from both groups of not to add those areas. Okay, these are the areas of more significance to the local working group. This is a proposal from QEP to, again, Pinedale. This is top of the mesa, the anticline. These are the flanks, as they are known locally. Proposal from QEP to remove the flanks from core. This red line is the EIS boundary.
Can you see that okay between the two?
What's that?
Can you see that okay between the two? I can change the color if that's confusing.
You're okay. You're okay. The EIS does have phrasing in there relative to management of these flanks. There's terminology in there relative to not developing those for 5 years and then looking at things like thresholds and so forth. There was discussion last night relative to sage grouse thresholds that have been reached. The local working group was not in full consensus. The industry folks were in support of removing this. The majority of the, and technically, there was one industry rep at that meeting. There are 2 members, but one was absent. So there was majority support not to include those areas. And last night, I think we were at an 8-2 split on this one. And you're gonna, I'm sorry? 8-1. We have one person that didn't, okay. And you're gonna hear this approximate 8-2 several times. I'll just let you know that sometimes Penny was in the 2 and sometimes Brian was in the 2. So there wasn't a consistent conspiracy there against 2 people. Those 2 people switched up depending on the proposal. Okay, moving to the south.
Sorry, just real
Yes.
quick, to be clear then, are those acres in the flanks gonna be maintained as core?
Well, that's not
That's the
our,
recommendation?
the recommendation from the, yes.
Okay.
I think the recommendation that I'm hearing is there's not consensus to change what you have.
That's, yes, okay.
Currently in core.
And it's based on the size of these
Yeah.
labs.
You go to default, which is the current core area.
Perfect.
Yeah, and that, again, 40, I don't remember the total number of birds that we're talking about in this
It's 5A.
5A.
Yeah.
Got to
Or 239 total peak.
be 239 birds is what we're, males, we're talking about.
And that's from the last 3 years. So,
It's higher.
Okay, moving to the south, the infamous MDL.
Phone call for Paul Ulrich, phone call for Paul Ulrich. They want you at the front desk.
The local BLM and Game and Fish Club submitted actually an area consideration. They didn't, we tried to make it clear this is an area to look at. We're not necessarily saying this is the polygon. There were several, 3 iterations of that. This is kind of the one that ended up being, okay, this is the more realistic of these. It gets at the resources that we're looking at. The other proposals connected down into here with the idea of actually connecting 2 core, not creating a new core. The issue here is the well-known through our process, winter range issue up here. This is the reason the existing executive order, and going back to 2010 actually, has the winter area in it. You as the SGIT knew that this was a winter area. You knew that it was outside of core and supported core area birds. You put in that language that is currently in the executive order in hopes of addressing this particular area. The SGIT established a working group, a subgroup, to look at this, worked with the Wildlife Society to do a more rigorous analysis on that. That's what you see here in these blue polygons. This is limited to the NPL project area. These are the areas that analysis said, yeah, these are qualified, supportable winter concentration areas. The whole EIS process is part of the working group that you assigned. Came back with a recommendation of go through the EIS process. That process is underway. This came in before that EIS process is done. So that's why it's on the table. This is another opportunity, I guess, to address this situation. The working group, again, was not in consensus with the industry not supporting the proposed additions based on the EIS and how far along the NPL process was. The remainder of the group, just the sheer number of birds in here and the importance of this winter concentration area led them to, what was obviously a tough decision for them. Something needed to be done up there. Last night, we had a very similar discussion, and I'm going to put Dave on the spot here a little bit because I think he articulated, I thought most of the group was nodding their head yes in this, and that he articulated it pretty well. This ended up being a 6-4 split. This is the area that we were most kind of split on.
6-4 on the blue.
No,
On the yellow.
Sorry,
On
I'm
the
the
yellow.
other way, the yellow.
Okay.
6-4 in favor.
6-4 in favor.
Yeah. So would you articulate that once
Well,
more?
I don't know if I'm going to remember. I tried to sleep at least some since then, but basically, some of the discussion that we had, as Tom's talked about, there is an ongoing NEPA process that has been around. I think the date that we were given in one of our presentations was about 2008 on this area. So really looking at kind of parallel processes here. And one of the things that we looked at was that the EIS process obviously is in place, will continue and will go forward. But if we were to look at this from the standpoint of just purely the habitat that's out there, as Tom's mentioned, the number of birds, the importance of this area, and you're kind of looking at two different things there. And if that EIS wasn't going, I think it was very clear that we would say, yes, we could probably all support that, barring that. But that EIS process is ongoing, is here. And so we looked at it kind of from the standpoint of saying, well, in a NEPA analysis, in the EA and in the EIS right now, particularly, one of the critical components there is getting public input. I mean, that's what that NEPA process is about, to allow for that, to allow for the consideration of all the activities, all of the issues, all of the things on the board. And we talked about a couple of those last night, that are things that were being considered. And so I think, at least certainly for me, one of the things that I really looked at is this was an opportunity to really inform that NEPA process, to say, hey, this is a very important area. It's of critical importance because of the number of birds that are out there, because of the overall importance of the area. But we also acknowledge that there's another process going on here. And so we're really, I think, as it was pretty clearly articulated last night, really making this, yes, it's significant. We're very much informing that ongoing EIS process. And we anticipate that will be satisfactory in resolving this. But barring that, if we didn't have that EIS going, the consensus was that was important enough of an area that we would include that. That's kind of an expansion of what I for the for that side of the perspective.
Kenny, do you want to
And
add
this
into
is the
that?
one area where we did have the subcommittee that did weigh in and make recommendations.
What'd they say?
That was when we were on.
Oh, right,
Yeah.
okay, I see what you're saying. I thought you meant the local working group, like more comments.
And remind
So it's
us
one
again,
person
Jenny,
that
what
weighed in.
was that?
Sure.
What was your recommendation from that committee that studied that area?
That the proponent and BLM be cognizant of the science that they found out there and do extraordinary
Extraordinary?
planning.
Which that's just another way of saying, I think, the same thing. It's an important area.
So they put it all on buddy.
Thanks.
And a proponent.
And
I mean, it was put to both.
No, and I summarized it last night, and I think Dave did as well. I mean, this is not new. I mean, this is explicitly why Bob created that subgroup to tackle this thing, and we went about it in a collaborative fashion. It's like other information, informing the EIS process. And so the school of thought out there is essentially let the EIS process work.
That reminds me, last night, when I tried to go to bed, all I was thinking about was this stuff and actually dreamed about it. One of the things that we talked about, okay, we're going to vote for the Buddy or the Holly gift. That's like, Buddy Holly.
After 10, it got really bad. That's all I
You
can
should have
say.
been there at 1:30 this morning. Okay, we're going to move on.
Tom, I might say that with one point of clarification here, and I think this is important, that when that subgroup was created and that recommendation was made, it was for the NPL project area only. Some habitat, winter habitat, occurs outside of that EIS boundary. I just want to make that perfectly clear.
I was just gonna question what the process is going forward with the yellow section here then, since there wasn't an agreement within the subgroup.
Yeah, well, Bob will address that, but that's, we just kicked it up to you guys.
Yeah, and so is that conversation happening today, or is
No.
that happening what's that process?
We'll start those on the 6th.
Of May?
We need to let them get through all the process. We need to get through the EO. Then it's just that. And so your final recommendation will be done at that end of May meeting, unless, depending on the order, we may actually get to this one on the 6th. And then you as a group will discuss it and be able to make a recommendation at that point.
Thanks.
Buddy's point, I think, suggests maybe an opportunity, and that is that if there's land out there that is critical winter habitat and is not within the NPL, and we're saying that we already think that what's out there is recognizable as extremely valuable, should we not incorporate those lands that are not addressed by the EIS? I know that's a bit of developing freckles around this, but that's what winter habitat can be. It isn't the frequently think in this, but it's something out there that we can protect in future development.
And to add to that, and I can't define it right now, but while there was a lot of contention with this proposal with the local working group, the industry person at that meeting stood up in Pinedale and said, ours wasn't a hard no entirely. I think they mentioned areas west of NPL that they might, I'm not speaking for them, but they might, entertain that kind of an idea and support. So just a thought.
Yeah, a couple things on this one, and I realize that it's highly contentious. One thing that is not highly contentious is that we do know we have a winter concentration area in western Wyoming. We've recognized that in the existing EO, and we will continue to recognize that. What I regret is the implication or the insinuation that this area is going to be drilled or somehow be impacted in the near future. It is not. And I think we're prepared as a state to make it quite clear that there is a process going on to evaluate what is acceptable there. Independent of whether it's in or outside of that, we've got a pretty good identification of that winter area now. And I think we need to be as cognizant, as wary as we have been about that. That kind of separates it, because this exercise primarily is to look at core areas. And winter is a different animal, if you will. And so we recognize we've got a different beast out there. We recognize it's very, very important. The question is, how do you deal with it long term? But in the short term, I don't believe, and Buddy, and you'll have to, I know I've talked with Paul, there's no applications out there. There's no APDs. There's nothing out there that's proposing to move dirt or to disturb in those areas. And that's the way we'd like to keep it until we have some definitive statement from the EIS. So whether it's in or out of the analysis area, I think we want to remember that we're looking at maintaining all of our options and the integrity of the area, particularly in the short term. Does that help at all?
What kind of a time frame are we? I mean,
A year and a half, I think, on the EIS.
That's the current estimate.
Yeah, current estimate, we've got about a year and a half to go, and from joint energy standpoint, we understand and we have understood for years the significance of the winter concentration area in NPL. We funded the flyovers, we funded the RSF model that defined the winter concentration area, and we did that first and foremost because we recognize and understand the significance of those populations. And we want to make sure that we get the science right and the science is applied appropriately in the EIS where it properly belongs. We've had that EIS plan of development partially developed to account for wildlife in all of NPL. Are those numbers where they need to be with respect to winter concentration areas? That's what the process is going to determine for those identified winter concentration areas. And we want to be able to follow the science to get to that point. And that record of decision we're looking at in hopefully, Buddy, what, late 2016, early 2016, 2016?
Whatever you say, Paul.
10 years.
Yeah, and to your point, we're committed to suspend, and I hope everybody captures this today. You know, any interim development in NPL acreage currently identified as winter concentration areas. At this point, we're making that commitment today until the BLM and cooperating agencies, which is the state of Wyoming, Game and Fish, and many others, have a chance to get through the EIS process, evaluate current science, current recommendations, and apply that through a record of decision. You know, all we ask is allow the process time to develop an appropriate level of science-based protections with respect to our valid existing rights. And we want to be at the table providing what we can from a technical and economic consideration for that period of time until a record of decisions issued that accounts for these winter concentration areas and protects those winter concentration areas. The concept that there was a lot of conflict over this in general, I think got a little bit overblown, Bob. All of us want to make sure that winter concentration area is protected at an adequate and science-based level. That's the bottom line from our position. And
So I think
the vehicle should be the EIS process. The record of decision, as you all know, are awfully ironclad. We don't have much wiggle room. When you want regulatory certainty, a rod is that vehicle.
Yeah, I think the key point here is that we're not going to see development in there until such time as that's complete. And I think that will ultimately be the position the state will take. And it will be, right now, nothing's going to happen. And when we've had the chance for all of that analysis, great. But that's, I think, where we are as of today. And we will get the chance, Joy, to come back and look at it and determine how we're going to do it. I want to do that in the context of a winter concentration area conversation, not a core concentration. Because if we mix and match, then you end up with two conversations that sometimes are at cross purposes.
And I understand, I agree with that process. I understand that's where we are. I'm going to go back again though and say, what percentage of that core winter habitat that we have identified as clearly core winter habitat is not included in this process? Because I don't want somebody else out there developing an opportunity in their heads or anywhere else. We need to identify it, isolate it, and call it winter critical habitat so that it doesn't become a conflict again. So I would suggest that we, you know, if the BLM can tell us, or if NISA can pull it out somewhere in the immediate future, we protect those other, and I'm not saying core, I'm saying as winter habitat that we know of and we're going to protect.
Right. The Fish and Wildlife is kind of stuck in the middle in that we're not going to have a RAD before the decision needs to be made. So it's, for us, it's still up in the air, even though, you know, if we could get a statement like Paul had, that would give us some certainty of, okay, it's not going to be developed until the EIS is done.
I think you will have that, and you'll have a response before the next meeting.
All right. That would be very helpful.
Mark, we're committed on that front. We'll put it in writing, not to have any level of interim development in those winter concentration areas until a record of decision is issued.
Okay.
Okay, let's move on.
Okay, well, that's the end of this working group. So did you want to open it wider?
Yeah, questions, comments? Up or agreed? Okay. Next.
Just one, to Brian's point, and maybe I misunderstood you. In terms of, put winter back up there. I mean, there isn't a lot of winter that isn't under some form of EIS right now.
Right, the bulk of the others.
I responded to Buddy's comment where you said there was a significant percentage that was not covered by it.
Not in NPF.
Right.
But it's under the.
It's within the EIS boundaries.
Of Jonah and NPF. The remainder is
Well,
Jonah.
like this is in a different EIS.
That's actually in the Anacline boundary.
Right.
Is that it? Okay.
It's not Jonah.
So yeah, put the, there. See, so really the only, these two little polygons right here are the only part of that winter mix that.
What's the hatching indicate?
That is analysis by the local BLM and Game and Fish. They had these polygons before the Wildlife Society came in took that information and did a little more rigorous, the RSF.
The blue is the modeling, the white hatched is the local observations, correct?
So the TWS exercise didn't go out here, but through the local delineation process, which you see here, you see it both places. So the TWS basically validated the local process. So all I'm saying is to Brian's point, there's not a lot of winter habitat outside of an EIS area to consider in that regard, if I understood your.
That's what I'm trying to get to. Again, responding to Buddy's comment, but nonetheless, we know we need that winter habitat. And if there's aspects of it of whatever size that we can protect and keep from getting into this conflict, we should.
Well,
Is it part of our existing mapping that we've already established, or you pick up what's actually outside of EIS? That's what I'm saying. At some point.
Fundamental to the EO has been the idea that the core area protects not just core habitat for the summer, but the other life cycle environments, right? And I think, so in this case, we have a case where that isn't captured in the boundaries of the map. And I think, to me, that's where I struggle with the decision to move forward without some boundaries on a map that make that transparent to everyone in the state that, that there is this area outside that very well appears to be needed to protect the life cycle of all the birds in the evergreen, could very well be. And so I guess what I would ask is there consideration of a process where you add some kind of lunar concentration boundaries formally to the map to add that transparency?
I think we can identify an area of concern, but to put a boundary around something that's currently being analyzed probably is premature. So there's a difference between a boundary and an area that we know we need to do an analysis in, but yet there will be an area identified. That is what you're asking.
That is what I'm asking, and will it be incorporated into this, the boundaries that we all recognize as
core area boundaries? No.
Well, critical to the bird, considering the bird in the future.
Tell me if I'm missing you here, Bob, but we're suggesting there may be differences between core restrictions.
Exactly.
And winter restrictions.
Exactly.
And that we may well be mapping seasonal habitats that incorporate scientifically developed restrictions on that seasonal habitat, which may be different than those that are binding overall core habitat.
As far as we know, yes, I agree. And as far as we know, and we have people who have been looking, this is the one anomaly in 11 states that popped up where we have significant numbers of birds that are not in proximity to core. And good for us, we do recognize it, we did find it, but that's been, if you all remember when the first time this came up, I think I've shared with you, all of a sudden we're getting phone calls and somebody saw 7 males on a ridge top outside north of Worland, and that should be a winter concentration area. And then we had a report that we saw 5 males hanging out at the Old Dip Bar in Medicine Bow, and that was, it was like, whoa. So you had a long debate, discussion, and fact finding about what are we talking? We're not talking 5 guys walked into a bar here. We're talking hundreds of birds in one discrete location. So yeah, that'll be mapped. Of course, that'll be identified. It's already done. But I think we're going to have concurrent processes working at the same time. The beauty is, as I said before, nothing is going to get permitted out here. So that takes that immediate threat off the table.
I guess why not codify it? We created connectivity areas to deal with that aspect of it.
Oh, and ultimately we may. We'll see.
Okay, moving to Southwest. We'll just join right on here. This was a This entire area was actually kind of a joint, Pinedale, Rock Springs, BLM, gave the proposal. These are relatively new LECs in this polygon. We got Farson sitting right here. This is the local working group boundary. So the Southwest Local Working Group poached a little bit into the Upper Green River with their recommendations, but the local working group, we're talking about Southwest now, was in consensus to add this with the caveat from the brand new oil and gas representative, who I don't envy for his first meeting. He got to go to this meeting within the local working group. But he did a very good job, and his concern was, okay, I want greater input from industry on this. If we don't hear anything from industry, I'm okay with this. And you're going to see that repeated in different places around here. The comment that we have received via the public was a verbal comment by the Pete Arabell, who runs sheep through this country. He was I'd say philosophically opposed to the concept. There wasn't a real specific, and that was fairly across the board. Yeah, he had some comments on other places too. Same general philosophical issue with the proposals.
This isn't the one that has the unit in it.
It was, and look, I put it up,
Yeah.
right there.
Oh yeah, that's right. That's what the B means. There's a small unit right here, and the line is drawn by the original proposal team through here. We took out that unit last night as a recommendation. And again, these are based on new. I mean, go ahead and put the density up. So if you look at the history of these LECs, this would not have been read in the past. Okay, moving on, let's go straight west, I guess. Okay, this is Fontenelle Creek, Fontenelle Reservoir right here, LaBarge Creek. This proposal originally came up in 2010 at the local Southwest Local Working Group. They were finding these LECs in that year. This is about as far away from the administrative office as you can get, fairly remote to get to this time of year. There was some flying done. The Pinedale BLM guys did a lot of on the ground work out there. And go ahead and turn on the density. This is what has shown up, and that red wasn't there. In 2010, these guys were finding these LECs, and they came to the local working group meeting. I think Bob probably remembers that they said, hey, we're finding these new LECs out here, we got to add this. It's like, well, no, you don't, it's not solid. You haven't confirmed them, so it doesn't meet the criteria. It does now.
And the challenge, I will tell you, this really is a lost corner of the state. This is the southwest furthest point away from the Pinedale BLM office they have. Nobody wants to go out there, so they don't. It's kind of in between all the game and fish offices. So it was, when they came to us, they said, we think we have quite a few birds. What we said is, look, we're going to take a look at this down the road in 5 years. You get the data, bring it back. This is one that I would throw out to you, and whether you choose to do it or not. But when we talk about compelling information, it was lacking then. I think this is an example where they went out, did their homework, came back and said, you know what, it was even more than what we thought. So hence the proposal now. It actually was proposed before, we just didn't have the data.
Tom, how much private land would be impacted by this?
We'll tell you in just a second.
I don't have exact acreage figures.
I can show you land status anyway.
It's coming.
The chair of the Southwest Local Working Group lives right here, Oregon McGinnis.
Is this 9A?
This is not me.
So this is the one that has the existing unit in the center?
It has,
What was the question?
If
I
it's
think
this
you might
sign,
need
and did I
Let me
see an
turn that
existing
on.
unit in the center last night?
oh.
Yeah, I just,
It's drawing again.
It's drawing.
Yeah. Give me a minute. We're asking lots of things.
Yeah, let's take off this color so we can see that,
Okay.
the colors of the actual land status.
It's got to finish drawing. Take off this
The
one.
proposed color, yeah.
Every time you make a change, it's got to draw again.
Not much is the answer, Paul.
And
Oh, there's a
this is not,
Federal unit smack dab in the middle of it.
I think we looked at it.
Yeah, when we look at,
We all dry holes.
yeah, it's all, yeah, we did, if you want, we can,
This one.
actually, the Oil and Gas Commission, their site is down this morning, I couldn't get onto it, so we can stream that, because we had it last night, but it was,
Do we know if it's a pre-08 established federal unit?
Yes, it is.
Okay, so whether or
Late
not they were
70s, I
drawing
think
dry
it's
holes
over
is
for us.
irrelevant.
Yeah.
It's still an 08, pre-08 unit.
Yeah.
Which raises another question. If we're adding core over activity, how do we deal with pre-08 and everything between 08 and 2015? Would it be considered exempt as well? I
This
know
is pre-08, it's gonna be the same as the original order.
that's not my question,
Well,
but
there's a lease since.
yeah, what if there was a
2010?
unit established or other projects established between 08 and 2015?
Well, we'll get to that after we do the map.
Okay.
Because that's in the order. That's why I was trying to do the order first. You know, best laid plan. I was just being nice. I had to change.
There was consensus by, and this I think was, last night was 100%, and local work group was consensus to add that.
And Tom, one more time, that was a consensus of the local working group and of your group?
Yes.
Yes.
with recognition of the pre-08.
Of these?
Yes.
Recognition.
And what's that mean with the recognition, just that it's there? Is there gonna be a hole around it or?
That was a unit boundary.
I think so, I think, Nissa, I heard you right, and I believe, I know that area pretty well. There's no production in that unit.
yeah, here's the producing wells. It's just the producing ones, and there's
So you got
one
one well drilled.
in the unit.
I think it's right.
Yeah, when we turned it on last night, it was a bunch of dry holes, that kind of stuff.
Okay, moving to the southwest over by Cokeville. Oh, one thing, you tell me how detailed you want me to get. One of the mapping exercises that has been gone through is the sage grouse range map for Wyoming. So there was some edge trimming and adding. The local working groups went through that. There's places where there was a little bit shaved off of core, places a little bit was added. There was one area that we received comment on that we discussed last night that you'll see here in a little bit. But do you want to look at every one of those little slivers, or?
No, I don't think that's necessary. I think you brought that up at the last meeting, and unless somebody tells me otherwise, those are simply matching habitat to an existing edge boundary. The total effect of that probably is a 0 between what you take out and what you put in. That's just the fitness mapping that we did the first time. So unless you know or someone identifies a conflict, that's just doing your homework and doing it right. Is everybody comfortable with that?
Yes.
I think, okay, then I wouldn't get into it.
Okay, so we need to go to Cokeville. Okay, as you might remember, a couple years ago, Utah contacted us and was interested in seeing if we would change the lines to better match their lines. They had a few radio callers coming into what was non-core in Wyoming. At this time, this group decided there was not compelling, and so did the Southwest Local Working Group, that it was not compelling reason to make a change mid-course. In that interim time, this particular lake right here was, I'm going to say, rediscovered. It had been mapped. Okay, it's coming back, I'm sure.
Sorry.
It had been mapped on this side of the road. People were looking over here, and I'm guessing they probably heard it or found it over here. This resulted in changing the density map over here to something that, well, to red. So combined, there was a proposal, this is within the local working group, to add this outside polygon right here. This is the Bear River Meadows new wildlife refuge over here, which is not, it's refuge status, but actually mostly private ownership, I believe. I think I'm correct when I say mostly private. So there's that proposal to add that polygon. The Lincoln County Commissioners and Jonathan Taggart and the Taggart family made comments on this, and well, I think, and this group ended up thinking last night that there was a reasonable proposition made that this is a county road along here, that the actual farmland and refuge properties weren't, great sage grouse habitat, so let's use that county line. They also, the county also had a proposal for a connectivity, thinking that this polygon would need to connect over here. The thought of our group last night was that we're connected. This is Idaho up here. This is Utah, so the tri-state would be right here. You can see those different levels of core here by the different colors that Bob was talking about. But we're adjoining to core in those other states by adding this polygon. So going against slightly what the local working group provided, but we are addressing public comment in this case by going with this polygon as recommended by this group.
Yeah, and the two things I would just throw out for your consideration. One is, normally under your context of core areas, you would never do this, drop a line down through it, even though it's non-habitat. I mean, that is wetlands, barley fields, that's non-habitat. The importance of the one on the west side there is that it's actually Utah and Idaho birds for the large part. We do have leks on our side, but those birds in Ridge County and in southern Idaho, that is a major consideration the service has to look at as they do their analysis, are those birds accounted for in that tri-state area? So in deference to the other two states, I think we just acknowledge that and put it in what we'll call core, because they're using the same basic definition of core as we are. So it really is extending Utah and Idaho core across the imaginary boundary. That's why it'll look different, but I think it's okay to make that departure in a case like this where you've got jurisdictional boundaries actually creating that situation. That core area actually, that's the far northeast corner of it. It actually goes to the west and south. Is that fairly stated, Tom?
I think so.
I think it helps us make a case too with the service and others that the states are collaborating on this and are working together across political boundaries.
Yeah, and we, yeah. Okay.
Okay, moving, let's see, I think we're going to Opal probably. There's some minor, those tweaks down along the UNS, we won't look at, just minor changes down there.
Where did you say you were going? Oh.
Yeah. Okay, this one has generated quite a bit of discussion at all levels. There was going to put the full Anadarko proposal on here. Received a proposal from Anadarko to remove core from this eastern end, here, to orient you, Kimmer and Opal, I think we said about here. The Anadarko proposal was to remove this purple polygon.
Where are the diamonds?
We'll get to those in just a second. So again, the yellow dots are casual wildlife system observations. I think they're all green in this case, and some red ones. Those are different years of radio-collared birds from the Utah State Sage-Grouse Raven study. And in this case, those are multiple birds. We looked at this last night for that exact question. Just in this polygon alone, there were numerous birds. This is not GPS collars like a lot of these where you just get dots on top of dots. These are traditional, they may be checking these once a month or once a week during nesting season or something like that. So you don't have that density of observations. Based on mostly this data you see here, the local working group was in agreement to excise this. Well, actually, it was non-consensus. Trying to remember.
Yeah, I have discussed written down, but maybe.
I have consensus on D.
Okay, that's fine. I could have gotten it wrong.
We may not have the color right there, but there was certainly a majority,
in the local working
at
group.
the very least, of local working group willing to do that. But they looked at it as okay, we'll cut here, but we've got birds that are summering up here along the Hams Fork, and we want to add some in there, kind of in exchange. Because of this use in here, they didn't feel comfortable removing that piece.
The colors were what we decided was.
Oh, okay, this is what,
I color coded it for us instead of the word.
okay, but this shouldn't be yellow even.
Right, for us it was. It was consensus in the group, in the
8 to
local
2.
working group, but it was not for us, so that's.
We had some dissenting.
So it was 8 to 2 for us.
Well, okay, but that meets the Bob Bud definition.
That is.
Okay. I'm changing the color.
That's true.
So it was an 8 to 2 split. So you use that however you want to use it.
8 to 2 to go out there
To go out here and to
and
add
to add that.
the,
Full now.
So the yellow out, the red in.
and yellow, this outside.
There's 2 stacked.
It's about.
The local working group was not, there was differences of opinion, and I don't remember the split of who wanted what, but some folks said this line, some folks said, well, that makes a weird looking,
Okay.
just round that off. But they couldn't, it's a small area, but yeah, everything becomes a matter of scale, and when you're working on the ground, you got my favorite 40 acres going on here, so.
All right, so that's one that'll come back to the team here. Correct?
Yeah, I mean, well, there was consensus of this group on an 8 to 2,
Yeah.
so you decide what that means. But, yeah, that's what it should look like based on those criteria you provided on 8 to 2.
And the reason that other one went away is the polygons are stacked on the polygon.
But this goes away from this group's recommendation.
Goes away,
There's mud
goes away out of core.
out of core. This remove, this add is the consensus, and this stay where it is. Okay, moving to the east. Okay, this is the seed skitty core. This is an interesting one, in that, how'd we end up on this one? 9 to 1 on this last night. The local working group came to consensus on this. There was a holdout for a while in the local working group. The recommendation is is to remove this area from core. The history on this particular area is that it used to be, prior to 2010, it was connected down here to the core that exists down here. This small area was, the core was left as core. This area around the trona mines was removed, most of the trona mines, but one major exception. One thing to keep in mind on this one is that the transmission corridors were actually added after the fact, after the local working groups had met and drawn these lines. So when the group looked at this area as a whole, it's like, you know, this just doesn't meet the definition of core. And so a recommendation came within the local working group the day that they met. Let's recommend that this not be core. We've got more important, you know, the area between Fontenelle and the Barge Creek. We've got areas that are more important, sage grouse. Let's keep that, or recommend we get that. And because of the disturbance out here, maybe this one should go away. There was one member, and I need to relate this because this was part of his willingness to be in consent, was that he wanted to make very clear that there was not pressure on the local working group to excise this as core, that it was a local.
You just spit it out.
What's that?
It was FMC. I mean, come on. I say a bit tongue in cheek here. It's kind of interesting that in the end, we had people that were in industry that kind of wanted to stay in core. And then you had other people saying, no, let's not. And so I don't know where you ended up, but
yeah,
I've had that conversation, and you know, what you guys come up with is fine.
Yeah, no, it wasn't.
Oh,
Yeah,
Yeah, it wasn't at all. That was the point.
They actually wanted to add
person was
core.
afraid that people were going to say, oh, it was FMC that made you do this.
no, I mean, they were the holdout on the other side saying, we don't necessarily want it to go out of core.
Oh, no, it wasn't FMC that was the holdout. Yeah. It was a retired guy. Has no, no, he's not beholden to anybody at this point. FMC actually came to the table that day with a proposal to add.
I know, and now I want to know, Julie, where are you guys at with this?
Sure.
Because you sunk a ton of resources into improving that core area.
Sure. And
Does that impact you, or what's the?
We kept
yeah, I can.
9 to 1 to keep.
Oh.
We kept that last.
Okay, I'm
Yeah,
going to
yeah.
let
To
Julie
finish.
clarify, then I need to make a major clarification.
Okay, or do you want to finish yours, Tom? And
So it was actually, I must have been the holdout.
You were.
You were.
It was 9 to 1 not to remove this.
Okay, last night.
He wanted to go with the local.
I went with the local working group.
Okay, now Julie, tell us.
Oh, okay. I'll speak first as a member of that local working group. I am the mining rep on that local working group. And the process that we went through was to review all the public proposals to add or remove core. And then we looked at all the density and went through a process of what should be added to core. And then the third step in that process, is there anything out here that just doesn't make sense to be core, that should be removed from core? So that was the end of that entire 8-hour day. And everybody, I mean, I of course abstained because the core that they were talking about had one of our facilities in it. And the conversation around the room from all BLM and the other regulatory agencies is this just doesn't make sense. We probably should not have put it in core to begin with. Then a transmission corridor came through in the northern third, which is where the majority of the birds are in the northern quarter of that core. There's another proposed Gateway West is going to come down between Seatskity and the eastern flank of that core. And so people were looking at it, and from an administrative standpoint, and I don't want to speak on behalf of the agency, but I know Nicholas would say this if he were here, we just went through a DDCT process to permit a reduction in a footprint in a project we had proposed, and that was actually more work on the agency's behalf than if we had gone in with new development. So people are just feeling it just doesn't make sense to have that as core. And one of the things that they asked of us specifically is you are doing, like you said, Bob, you're doing all this conservation on the ground. it's kind of similar to NEPA and NPL. There are other layers of protection that, in addition to the core area philosophy, that provides benefit to the sage grouse. And for 2 years, we've been actively pursuing with BLM and Fish and Wildlife Service conservation agreements, completely voluntary. And we've done a lot of work on the ground that actually we are doing for that conservation agreement, not because we were required by the DDCT for any kind of compensatory mitigation. So I wouldn't say, and there's actually Tronox is in the audience, other people in the Corps are in the audience. I'm sure they would want to speak to this. I'm speaking more from that meeting. But,
Can I ask you, Julie?
Yeah.
And you weren't a member of the SGIT or on the local working group when
Right.
this was drawn.
Right.
When did this restart? And was there a period of time that was an idle?
Well, no, we were always active. We were continuing to sell mine water for pollution control to the coal mines and whatnot. We just were in a inventory reduction period for a couple of years, and that facility was restarted.
In what year?
Oh,
Mothballed a couple different times.
Yeah.
Once in 2005 and then 2009, but it continued to operate.
All I'm getting at is
the perception is we were
this didn't
inactive.
come up in 2010 because it was in a market. The idea was that it's not, that isn't a disturbance out there.
Right, and people thought we were
I'm guessing.
not existing anymore, and we were just in a holding pattern for a couple of years because of economics. Yeah, so in effect, I wouldn't say that we want to still be in core, but we proposed that if we were in core, we would expand it to cover more of the riparian areas. So we did have a proposal. Other people pulled proposals out from those conversations because the group recommended to have this removed. So there would probably be other discussion, on this core area if the team here were to say keep it as core. But I think too the local working group would be a little, I don't know if slighted is the right word. I think they would feel a little disappointed if their recommendation didn't go forward, because it's on both sides of the sideboard. If something doesn't make sense, pull it off. If something makes sense to add it. But I'm sure other people with permits in the area might have a comment on this. But that's the view of the local working group.
And so what did your team do last night?
It was 9-1 the other way, opposite the local.
So
working
leaving
group.
core.
And I'm going to let someone else articulate, from the working group, on the 9 side of that equation. Anybody want to take a stab at that?
I guess my initial thought on it was to go with the local working group recommendation. And then as discussion took place, and I don't remember what time of the night that was. But
this was still early. It was like 9:30.
Oh.
9 o'clock. After 9 o'clock.
I left. You were right there.
But I guess I came to the conclusion that it probably didn't matter to FMC whether it was in or out. It probably wasn't going to change a lot. It still had protection measures in. So I came back the other way on it. It seemed like Ryan
My
had some.
interest was that we've got transmission core and we're doing battle all over the countryside over what does transmission mean to grouse, and this was an opportunity to actually study what transmission means to grouse. And if we're maintaining it within core values while we're looking at that, it gives us a clear view.
So is there a study going on there?
Right. Say again, Sharon?
Are there actually like radio tag birds or an opportunity to study there?
I think there is. That's part of why we
There's
talk about it.
opportunity there or not yet.
The only thing I would caution on that is I'm going to have to question opportunity for statistical power in a small population.
Yeah. This would be my recommendation, this one. That in this case, I think you've got too many moving parts to bring this back here as an either or. Because what I'm hearing from Julie was, if it's going to be in, we need to talk about what it looks like, whether that transmission corridor becomes the north boundary or whether that's incorporated, whether you include the riparian. What does it look like if it's in or out? I think the context of the previous discussion was, is it in or is it out? Not under what form would it be? So I really would think this is a case where we might ask the local working group, the people who have been involved here, to take one more stab at this and come back. And if they come back and say, under no circumstances whatsoever should it be in, great, then you have that recommendation. But I think we're kind of dealing with half the picture here as opposed to the full picture based on what I'm hearing. And with everyone's permission, I think this would be one to take another look at. Is that fair?
Yes.
If you will draft the language to that effect.
I will. Yes, I will. Okay.
Okay, moving on. We'll try to pick up pace here a little bit. Let's see, let's go east to White Mountain.
Just to clarify, Bob, does that mean your mind the working group will, staffing group will get another chance to vote on?
You'll do it together.
Okay.
Or a subgroup.
Okay, Rock Springs, I-80, White Mountain. This is the rim. In 2010, this area right here was added according to the discovery of these leks in here and how they showed up on the density map. The original proposal was to add let's see.
The red is on top of the green, as Eric just pointed out, but because there's proposals on top of proposals and polygons on top of polygons.
Can you put it underneath?
Because it's in the same polygon, it takes more time and, look, we've got it. There. I can highlight it and we'll see the value.
Oh.
Yeah, there's complicated GIS and all this where you have proposals on top of proposals and different alternatives.
Let's see if that.
It was difficult to display, understand.
Thanks,
There we go.
Lisa.
There you go.
There we go.
Okay, so there were two different wind projects, one here, one down here. Proposal from within, from a local working group member, based on the idea that these projects were no longer on the table. Permit expiring for monitoring up here. This area was also proposal from Wild Earth Guardians that included this red polygon. The local working group trimmed back this proposal. This is the local working group line here, not to include this. There was a comment letter received from Rock Springs Grazing opposing this addition into core. That came after the local working group met, but the group last night had access to that letter. These are grouse observations. And so the local working group was in consensus to add, and what was the tally last night? 9-1 to add that. Into core. Are we taking comments on these now or at the end?
You're at the end of this one? Yeah. Any comments on Southwest?
No, we are not at the end.
Oh,
That's why we're at the end of this particular proposal.
No, just keep
Okay.
moving.
We lost this. There she is.
I needed a break.
Moving to the northeast slightly. This is a proposal from Northeast Guardian, or Northeast, Wild Earth Guardians, to add both the green and the red here to core. I believe this was excised in 2010 based on these sand dune areas right here. The working group looked at this a little closer and with the consideration of nesting habitat for that 54 bird elect right here. They still maintain that's a sand dune that has very little sage grouse use. There are, and there's our sand dunes up here too, but less extensive, and also they have the what are called flockets, the interdunal pools that have riparian vegetation associated with them. That grouse use those, even though you don't necessarily see them. Oh, is that the wilderness study
I
area?
got it this morning.
Okay, that's interesting. Because I drive to that like on a well-established two track.
It's a study area.
No, it doesn't. There's wires.
Yeah, and
Tom, we need to talk.
Me and about 300 other people, there's no little carcinite signs along the way.
so does the infolding mean maybe it's not a wilderness study area?
I think there's a landing strip right in the middle of it.
Let me see if I can symbolize it based on the visual things.
Well, but we're not going to spend much time on this, especially if I'm about to go to jail.
Take that off.
Yeah, that's not it. But you'd ask for it.
At any rate. The proposal from the local working group was to add this piece in the core, and what was the number last night?
So all this.
Okay, so everyone,
Unanimous.
it does have wilderness study area protection already, which certainly is far more extensive than the core area standard, but not to add this. Okay, moving on quickly.
Where are you going?
Let's see, let's go, to the continental divide. Okay, here we are Bridger Cole, Point of Rocks, somewhere in here. This is Spring Butte. This is a proposal from Anadarko to remove this piece of core. Future potential for coal mining in this polygon right here. This proposal came after the local working group had met. There's been email conversations between local working group members. At best, I think there would be non-consensus on this. Every comment I've received so far has been, no, this does not meet the criteria to remove core. And last night, the SGIT group was unanimous not to support removing that piece from core. Moving to the south, we're on the border here of the working group. We're moving south of I-80.
Let me zoom out here.
You can zoom out a little bit to capture the context of this. Okay, so here's Rock Springs. This is the Salt Wells core. The Hiawatha field sits down here to give you some perspective of where we're at. There's the density map. One of the things before we move off this density map is in 2010, original proposals were to add a large chunk in here based on the size of these leks. There's wind power proposal in here. I believe comments from Rock Springs Grazing also in this, perhaps oil and gas as well. I don't remember all the comments on this, but we ended up with this red line as being in core, which is going to take the density off. Now, although keep in mind this, and we'll get over here as well. So the proposal originally and this evolved over time from Anadarko. Originally, this was a proposal just to the South Central Local Working Group, which we'll be moving to here in a bit, to remove this to the Local Working Group boundary line. The South Central Local Working Group came back and asked Anadarko, well, you know, we're giving up something here if we do this. What can you look at some other areas and see if there's someplace else where we can compensate for this. The proposal came back with this, not actually in the South Central Local Working Group, but in the Southwest, to add these two polygons. The local working group, let's see. The local working group did not see all of this proposal. And correct me if I'm wrong here, Julie, until after the meeting.
Correct.
Okay. Again, I would say probably on this, there'd be non-consensus, majority opposed to this, feeling they were giving up too much. This is, that line was drawn in 2010 very purposefully, following habitat. This is juniper canyonland type country, so that doesn't add. There are, this, as you recall, does show up red on the map. That was a more viable addition to core. Going to put the radio color information. You're going to see a lot of this is going to take a while to draw. You're going to see a lot of points coming up here. Colorado's been doing research down here with GPS colored birds. You also have a study over Sierra Madre chokecherry country. We've actually got some birds coming from both directions out into this country, so it's presenting an issue. Yeah, this is where GPS collars, they can stack up 100 deep with a single bird. You have 3 locations a day on a bird.
This is not one bird.
I'm sorry?
This is not one bird.
No, I know, but even if it was one bird, you can have 100 locations. Yeah, there's
3 birds, right?
there are over 100 radio colored birds associated with this. So a difficult one. What was our result last night? 8-2 to not support, and this is a kind of a package deal. To not support that just because of the significance of this area. There's not an existing record decision covering that area that says it's going to be developed. So that's the story on that one. Let's just go to this small one. I'm sorry, get you back to the screen. This is a proposal from QEP. This is the edge of the Hiawatha field. Proposal to remove this area. You'll see as we fill in here, we've got the units. Here are the existing wells. Before that, well, we'll look at it later. The habitat consists of stringers of sagebrush going down draws, and in between salt desert shrub or grass. There's a little sagebrush in this area, and you can kind of see how the grouse are not targeting that particular area when you compare it to surrounding areas. This is a developed field down here. Consensus by both local working group and us last night, I think we were unanimous last night, was to support. There you can kind of see these habitat stringers. Was to support removal of this area from the border. Okay, moving to the east. As a result of that Colorado study, there were several new lakes discovered down here. This is even more remote than the stuff up there at Fontenelle. Here you see Colorado core down here, 87 bird lek, 66, 63. Significant leks. Here's the EIS record of decision boundary. The local working group itself made this recommendation to join Colorado core area with these adjoining large leks. Again, consensus within the local working group with that caveat of hey, we know that there have been some leases let in here in the last few years since the last executive order based on the fact that this is supposed to be non-core. So there was that, certainly that concern expressed. We have not received public comment on this. Well, one exception would be Mr. Arabelle again. Did not support this, the sheep now. Last night, our tally was what?
Unanimous.
Unanimous to join Colorado core with this.
So there are new leases,
I'm sorry?
so there are leases that are in this acreage?
Well, yeah.
But it's not going through a particular process right now, there's no APDs or anything like this
Not
that
that we've been made aware of.
therefore
If I could maybe speak to that, one of the concerns was, and you, Paul, was hitting on it, and I know Bob's going to talk about it, some of those areas were let out for lease because it was non-core. They were bid on by oil and gas because it was non-core, following current core, and now we might be putting it into core. So just as an entire concept.
And what we don't have is an accounting of how many
Right.
acres or what. And you can probably say that about most of these, I think.
Oh, exactly.
We're not reaching a decision.
Yeah.
Clearly, and where we're leading with that question, but again, that's part of the discussion on the order and on the appendices. When we did the first core areas, we had areas that were leased that were not prior core. What we did is protected prior and existing rights. And I think if you come now and you're going to say, now we're going to make something core, it is grossly unfair to someone who started under one set of rules to change the rules. So do it with your eyes wide open, that there may be a prior existing right there. And that you cannot do anything less than that and be fair. But that doesn't mean you can't do it. It just means you have to know. Now, if that's it, let's just say there were an EIS there and it had been approved for 4-acre spacing, I'm gonna argue you probably better not make it core. But if it's a different scenario, then I think you have to look at what the potential looks like on that landscape, given the prior existing right.
Yeah, I was just concerned because I didn't, their lease stipulation shouldn't be changed given
Correct.
what's created today.
Correct, and it won't.
That's what I needed to know.
That's exactly right.
Okay,
We're not gonna go back and re-stip leases that have already been made.
That loses the assurances, so
Right.
why those companies
Exactly.
even purchased that lease.
Spot on. Okay, I think there's just one more in this working group area. And actually, yeah, it'll be an easy one, and then, thanks for comments. Go to the planning board. Could call this a habitat one, I guess. But this is water. Somebody thought grouse were evolving web feet, but I have yet to see evidence of that.
That was actually U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service.
So I think think everybody, I don't think this generated any discussion. It was unanimous on both groups.
Adaptive genetics.
Okay, that's it for
Questions, comments on
Southwest.
Southwest? And we've got, I'm gonna try and, we're gonna get through these if we can. We're gonna try and do it by 12:30, so that gives you about 35 minutes to get through two more, right? You got two more?
Yeah, two and a couple, two, and we've got, yeah.
We'll do the other one when it's all done.
Okay.
Yeah, okay, go ahead.
I'm not gonna be able to stay after lunch. I have to travel through this wonderful weather. But I did want to mention one thing for the overall committee's consideration that arose as a result of discussions around the north end of the Atlantic Rim, where you're going to hear about a consensus that was reached to redact about, I don't know, probably about 45,000 acres out of existing core along.
Hold on just a second. Are we going there next?
Yeah, but he's leaving.
But I'm leaving.
Right now?
Well, I'm leaving after the lunch, at the beginning of the lunch break, so.
At 12:30?
Oh, are we gonna?
We're going here next.
Until 12:30.
Okay,
So
so
let's wait till
I had
we get to
11:30.
it.
Okay.
Okay.
I see Don walked in and I don't think he heard
Shram,
taking comments on
I
it.
tried to find you on White Mountain. I'm taking comments, but they just went through the White Mountain stuff you objected to.
Right. We sent a letter in, yeah.
Okay. Do you have anything in addition to the letter, or is that, I mean, we got
That's
your letter.
pretty much it.
Okay.
You know, it's, an impression we got from the website and the message that the rationale to expand it was the fact that a proponent for a wind farm backed out. That was the impression we had, plus it had gone through a major ES for that wind farm project due to economics, lack of Gateway West and the Canadian study. That proponent dropped out. That doesn't mean that someone else won't show up. There was also, of course, local politics, where every elected official is a resource manager, decides this and that. Concurrent with what we learned here was a front page article in a local newspaper that it sounded like the wind farm was being resurrected. Well, that guy went broke. He's opened a bond from BLM. Strange happenings on White Mountain, let alone the rationale that appeared to expand it. So we don't support that.
Yeah, we've got that in the record. So. Okay, others. All right, let's move on.
I had one question. Yeah, I'm sorry, I had to go to therapy. Mental health.
I was going to say. Is that your shoulder or your head?
A little shoulder.
Yeah.
We're all headed there. What happened out at Kenny Rim? Is there any change out at Kenny Rim?
Well, what do you mean?
Bitter Creek out behind Eversource, was there a change out there?
No, let's go back here.
Right there.
You decide if this is the area you're.
So Fort McLeod area.
Yeah. I'm trying to.
Let's see, name on probably.
I think the recommendation, Don, as I understood it, was not to add the two proposed additions, but to leave what was proposed to come out in.
No, all I got was the feedback that one of them was gonna be reduced and it happened to be in an area where we were looking at a well site. I didn't know what was.
If that stays the same.
Yeah, okay, yeah, that's just kind of curious.
Well, yeah, are you talking about the edge of the Hiawatha down here? There's a proposal to remove a
Not
small
way down,
piece.
no, just to the west of Johnny Eversole, Bitter Creek Ranch.
Yeah, right there. Up there, you got all the winter use. 27B is.
27B, so up at the top, the north corner.
Up there.
Okay, there's a proposal to remove that. The local working group and this group were in majority, but not full consensus, not to remove that.
Okay, let's go.
Okay, moving to South Central. Here's your overall perspective. Rollins here. Saratoga Valley, bags. Okay, so we'll just go right to that. This is a complicated area, a little less complicated after last night, but we received a proposal from Anadarko and, I didn't mention this last night, but it's in the files, that BLM also had some recommendations for some removal in this general area, to remove kind of a strip along here. BLM's actually went a little larger than this. In the local working group process, started looking at this entire area. You get the interstate here. Necessarily putting on different layers here. Wells. You've also got one thing that doesn't really show up. Maybe this is a railroad track. Transmission corridor. So the local working group actually expanded the area to be removed from what was requested based on the amount of disturbance here. So the existing core area, this is part of the Greater South Pass, actually crosses the interstate in this one location. Local working group and I think our group last night said that doesn't make biological sense with the fragmentation we've got going here. These birds aren't truly part of Greater South Pass. So there was consensus at both levels, and was it unanimous last night, to remove this green shaded polygon. Let's go ahead and remove some of the busyness here. We might need to add it back, but okay. There was a proposal to add, to connect this, what was left of this area, to the South Rollins. And that was based on what was, this is the Atlantic Rim EIS for coal bed methane development in this area. So there's a standing record of decision here. There was some thought at the local working group level that since the ROD came out, that the resource wasn't as developable as, in pardon my non-technical terms here, as originally hoped, and someone can clarify that. So that the hope was, I think, from the local working group that Anadarko was going to say, okay, we can do something in here because we're not finding what we want here. We're more interested over here. That hasn't been the case. That this is still prospective development in here. So the local working group was in non-consensus over this, but they said, let's ask industry about this. Industry came back and said, no, this is not something that we can forego. We have an existing EIS. And so last night, the group, and what was the tally on this?
We were unanimous there because there was supposed to be,
yeah, the reality.
Understanding that there was still a method development.
Yeah, again, the reality of the record of decision in here, the opportunity to connect across here simply didn't appear to exist at the present time.
Recommendation again, louder, I didn't hear Dave.
Sorry, it was unanimous to leave it out, to not accept that.
Okay.
So reject that addition.
So what does that leave us if you take out the green?
It leaves a small core area right here.
One little bitty core area there?
Yep.
70,000 acres. Can we look at that?
Yeah, we did. We decided it was
70,000 acres. Roughly, yeah, roughly.
And we had we had a rough number.
Oh, yeah, there'd still be over, well, it looks like around 200 males involved.
Plus you got the flight access as well across the core. It's not like they're.
I'm sorry.
Where's the closest core?
Well, it's across.
Right,
That's
right.
one.
50,000 acres would be with the core. Oh, and we did this, never mind. It is from here to here. Hold on.
Yeah, your opinion is 2.6.
Yeah. Let me change this back. 2.6 miles from there to there. It's a little wider down here, 3.6. 6.4.
Okay, I was just curious that leaving one little core area is kind of weird.
Yeah, unfortunately, it reflects reality of what's going on the ground, just because of all this, that's what you have.
Yeah, we do actually have a smaller one.
They
don't
have
we?
several smaller.
Yeah.
North basins are smaller.
Okay, moving to the south.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, now I think it's probably the right time. I just wanted to observe that this general area is has historically been recognized as one of the 3 largest nesting and breeding concentration areas for sage grouse in Wyoming and therefore in the world. And with this proposed action, what's going on here is that half of the proposed unit is being eliminated entirely, and it's being severed from any connectivity with the existing core. So by taking out this particular chunk of core and not adding anything to connect it, I am afraid that what we're witnessing right here today is the death warrant for this sage grouse nesting concentration area, which formerly was mostly in core and was separated from original connectivity based on an EIS that promised development that hasn't shown up. So that it's unfortunate, and it's really disheartening.
Okay, so this is the one you wanted to talk about earlier?
Right.
Okay, all right. Okay, keep going.
Going to the south, still within the same EIS area for COVID methane. Little Snake River Valley, down here, state line. Bags, Highway 789 going to Preston Junction. There were multiple proposals in here. This outside orange line was a proposal from Wild Earth Guardians for adding, this is core over here, EIS boundary, adding this what is pink and green into core. Proposal from, joint proposal now from BLM and local game and fish was this is actually an add here and here. These are actually removals from core. Based on these wells. A lot of birds associated here. Tony, what was the number?
Peak male, 3-year peak male count about 450.
Okay. So, in terms of number of males, we're talking about in any given proposal, this is the most birds we're talking about anywhere in the state. In terms of leks. A lot of public comment on this on both sides. We've got the oil and gas interest down here, CRMR. Did I get that correct? GRMR, sorry. That is not in support of this. We've got letters from O'Toole Ranch and the Little Snake River Conservation District in support of what is outlined here, both in terms of removal and addition. So not an easy issue in this regard. My understanding is that most of what is planned down here at this point is not CBM development, which again complicates the issue. This EIS boundary applies to CBM only, not conventional. And I'm sure someone will correct me if I'm mistaken on that.
Nature Conservancy, they gave me a letter last night.
Oh, we got a letter from the Nature Conservancy last night in support of the green proposal as well. So the local working group was in non-consensus on this. They wanted to get input from more industry folks on this. Was in terms of, there was majority support, but, and John,
Right here.
where are you?
Right here.
There you are. Correct me if I'm wrong on this. Would you say majority support for this?
Yes.
With industry saying, no, we need to hear more from industry?
What was the vote?
I'm sorry?
8-2.
8-2 on, for our group
Last night.
last night.
Last night was 8-2. Yeah. There was consensus on both levels not to do the wider area. There was some discussion about buffering these lakes more, but ultimately there was, the H2 was based on the original line proposed by Game and Fish and signed on to by, well, agreed to by BLM.
One of the challenges on this one was that the proponent, GRM, does not know exactly what they plan to do here yet. The Nature Conservancy also indicated that they've initiated some collaborative efforts between the proponent, TNC, and all the other stakeholders to look at potential conservation measures in this area. So it's a ongoing, it's a developing scenario, I guess we could say.
Okay.
And just so I have it correct in my head, so the boundary of the EIS is only specific to CBM, where the GRM is unconventional or some other form of development not addressed in the RA, therefore, okay. That you
But the same conditions would apply as what we're looking at for the leases.
Say that again?
I mean, I think we were looking at it from the same standpoint. If you have leases out here and this is a new, we're in core again, we're putting
Right.
something into core, so you have the same.
You're imposing a new.
You're imposing new restrictions, so on that stuff that's already done. It's treated just like.
Buddy, I've got a question. Assuming it's not in core, when a company were to come to you with an EIS proposal, how would, I mean, recognizing the situation on the ground, how would you look at that EIS in terms of sage grouse conservation?
Well, I mean, I think in the interim until EISs or even our plan amendments are done, we were following the core strategy. And if it were outside of core, we would manage that accordingly. Unless there is other data or information that would require us to do something different. But I think we try to follow along with what we've been doing for some time right now, Lyndon.
You'd be quarter mile, 2 mile, or you'd be 6/10, 4 mile. I mean, and you have a different density calculation, so it's a different set of standards.
It wouldn't be a density calculation.
Correct, outside.
Right. So we treat it as non-core.
It may be important to note that this all would have been core, except that it was projected to be in full field development very shortly.
Correct.
It was definitely enclosed in what we define as qualified for core boundaries. That development has not and currently will not take place, so I think it's very appropriate that we reconsider the boundary.
One thing I would note along those lines that we didn't mention last night, but talked about a little bit at the working group, was that South Central in general has a lower proportion, and largely to this polygon and to some extent the one to the north, as other than Northeast Wyoming has the lowest proportion of birds in core of the other local working group areas.
Lowest proportion of the total birds in the area that are.
Yeah, it's like 70% in South Central, a little less than 50 in Northeast, and everybody else is north of 80%.
Yeah, okay. All right.
Okay, we're just moving to the east
Like
slightly.
comment now or wait till we're done?
Could I?
Yeah.
Sorry, I'll move from behind that.
Hello, I'll keep it brief. I'm Lynn Gardner. I am representing GRMR. My therapist was with me last night and here earlier, but had to leave. So just make sure that everybody has the facts straight. This really is a question of valid existing rights. GRMR acquired leaseholds in this area knowing that there was established core. They took lands in this area that's subject to discussion today so that they had lands outside of core so that they could continue their development plans, knowing some lands would be stipped, some lands wouldn't, and that gives them maximum operational flexibility. They have invested over $10 million, I think it's 12, don't hold me to that, on a very sophisticated 3D seismic program to identify their target locations. And they have permits for exploratory wells right now. These aren't CBM, they're deep wells. These lands in this area are fee federal and state. Their project area as a whole is about a third. So BLM STIPs would apply to some, not to others. And so that's the position that they've taken. They filed a letter, but just to make sure everybody understands, and to help you remember GRMR, it stands for Greater Rocky Mountain Region. They also have holdings across the state line to the south. Thank you.
Thanks, Lynn. Okay, keep going.
Okay, moving,
Tony?
I just follow up too. I just want to make it clear, because there's been some confusion there, that this was proposed as my way to kind of needle at gas and oil, and really it's to needle at the U.S. federal government, sorry. In this area in particular, what we're looking at is a 2% increase to the South Rawlins core area, 2% land mass increase. But it increases the number of birds by 30%. Now, my understanding is that the U.S. federal government is looking at our program as a way to keep the bird from being listed. This is a case where gas and oil and wildlife can come together and say, you know what, we're going to make some concessions. So I would just really take a look at this area, and I understand the validating existing rights. I'm working with them on applications for permits to drill. I don't think there's any permits given yet. There are applications for permits in the actual core area there to the east. We've made concessions by actually removing some of these areas that right now are really adding to the DDCT, to the density issues that they're having in those areas. I'm conceding to remove those, to allow a little bit more flexibility in here. So I think that, look at the overall picture here. Removing some areas, make this a little bit more viable for some activity. Willing to work with the company on that. But, again, a 2% increase, about 20,000 acres, and 30% increase in birds to the working group that is only protecting about 70% of birds within their core area. So, again, I'm willing to work with the company on all this, but in my mind, a 30% increase with a 2% increase in land mass is a good deal, and I think it's something that the federal government, we can point to and say that we came down here and made some concessions, and we really are devoted, not only game and fish, but gas and oil and the SGIT to moving forward and really protecting this bird. So,
thank you.
Thank you.
Given the fact that we are to make recommendations by the end of May, I would suggest that the talks begin immediately.
The what?
Can you summarize then exactly what's proposed to be added and removed here again?
Yeah. These two polygons right here removed from existing core.
This would be helpful.
There we go. That shows it. So, and these two add. There was consensus last night not to go to the full extent of the Wild Earth Guardians proposal. Does that clarify?
Mm-hmm. Okay, let's go.
Okay, we're moving slightly to the, this originally was viewed as just a habitat matching issue. This is the area where I said we did receive a comment. Same company submitted that comment and the working group was in consensus. Add that. The group last night said, no, let's do not add that based on those comments, that it was not worth adding, or there was not enough bang for the effort.
In conjunction with what had been done on the west side.
Right, and that was in this context of, okay, we're asking for a lot over here, we can give a little over here. Okay, moving on, as we go around here, these are just gonna be these minor tweaks, so we won't spend any time. I think we're ready to cross the interstate, actually. There's quite a few of those little tweaks along the face of, see them over here.
Yeah, and we
these
saw
are-
those last time. I don't think those are.
Okay. Okay, moving north of the interstate then. We're still in South Central Local Working Group. Okay, going here to, we're at Barrow. Highway north out of Rollins, 287, Muddy Gap. Okay, this proposal is based on this radio collar data that's filling in here. Birds moving back and forth between fours. Still working.
It's gonna work for a while.
Proposal is to add that.
But we need to put the line against.
Yeah, I figured I'd show the grass duck and take it off and show the developer. So the blue dots here, there's 3 different areas around the state. It's like 1.5 million points. So it takes
As
a
a
long time.
statewide layer, we're just looking at it very small. I think it's done.
I think it is done.
So there's the radio collar data that the proposal was based on. Barrow would sit, we'll get it here in a minute. We'll keep this in your mind. We're going to switch and put the development layer up. Oil and gas wells showing up now. Mining areas.
I think that's it.
Okay, so the line was drawn consciously to avoid these wells, and we received public comment from John Cash, Larry Energy. This area was removed in the 2010 revision, and so last night the group agreed to draw a line here. The local working group was talking about, is this a connectivity area? They ended up being non-consensus, basically saying, kick this up to Sigit and ask about this idea of connectivity or core, what should this be? And so that they didn't really reach they just said, send this up and you guys decide what this qualifies
Let me
as.
ask you though.
I'm sorry?
It sounds like what they said is there should be something, we don't know which.
Yeah.
Yeah, at that time, they didn't have the boundary.
Yeah, all they had, it was just the grouse points. Miss and I drew in the line based on the intent of those.
And I was just trying to clarify that there was consensus on the group that that area should be identified, but either as connectivity or core.
I think that's
Is that right, John?
I think that'd be it.
Okay.
So yeah, last night, before this area was in last night, and then was this a 11 or full consensus? Full, with removing of the area as it reflected the comment. Okay. All right, we're moving to the east. We're going to go fairly quickly. These are habitat tweaks, rough, rocky juniper ridges, removal. These are removals on here, 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 and this is a removal as well.
We're adding this week.
And a little piece of adding here, all habitat related. And I think we are done in the south central, correct?
Yeah, let me zoom out and double check.
Okay, I allowed comments as we went, so I assume we're not gonna have to need a bunch more, but if there are any, let's get them right now.
Yep.
Okay, now, and we got Wind River left?
Yes.
All right, and let's wait on comments on this one until we get to the end. I think this one's pretty.
Yeah, the one thing I would say, when you said, let's do all of it, the restaurant Casper, I know there are people here. We last night, we took anybody that came for a particular area, we took their comments and addressed those as a group. And I know there are people here today that are interested in
Bates Hole.
This from Bates Hole, the ones we did cover.
Okay, well, we'll get to what you covered then.
Okay.
You got 7 minutes.
We're gonna hurry.
Or you're buying lunch.
We're right outside of town here. This is Table Mountain. The local working group was lukewarm on this, and it kind of gets to Lyndon's earlier point about incentives and not listing core or making core just because it provides for incentives. That was kind of what the discussion evolved around. Lukewarm support at the local working group level, but wasn't their priority. Last night there was, I think, unanimous consent not to add this Table Mountain area to core. Moving on. There's a couple, we won't go to them, around the winds of that week. No, you were okay. Actually, we got one just to the southwest here. There we go. Okay, this is Beaver Rim. This is Highway 2026 between Thermopolis Shoshone and Casper. This is populating now with some of the radio collar data from the Jeffrey City habitat study that's going on. This is the top of Beaver Rim. This was removed last time based on a proposed wind project, which from all appearances is not on the table. We've not received any comments to suggest that this is still a project that is being considered. So the proposal from within the local working group was to move up to the rim of Beaver Rim. Okay, going to the north. This we're going to be straddling the working group boundary, which kind of complicates just the communications involved here. Let's view that in and out. That's more informative in this case. We're going to start on the other side of the line here a little bit because it's kind of the basis for the entire analysis. This is the Wind River development area that is approved by record of decision. It's an emphasis on development that preceded the executive order, but in 2010, actually in 2009, this lek was found, an 80-bird lek, and this area was added to core and flew under the radar for this. Nobody caught the fact that this was already committed through a record of decision as a development area. So trying to go back and correct that, but the idea being that we don't, especially from the Bates Hole local working group perspective, didn't want to sacrifice that lek that in 2009 or 10 was an 80-bird lek. So they asked Wind River Group, can we somehow connect to this core, which is nearby, to keep this area for these birds in core. So that is the proposal to remove the red from core and to add core up here. There is what was discussed last night. We do have let's see, yeah, it's right here. Okay, this is a little bit, this is modified based on last night's discussion. We do have a unit here with producing wells in it. So we adjusted this polygon here to the north to not include that development. And so the proposal is to move this, add this to keep that left in core.
And so 17J was unanimous, and 11A, the add was an 8-2 to add that area.
Yeah, I think the two, am I correct to say that if they proposed the entire area is what they supported, further to the south here too, to go ahead and include that development in core. Okay, moving to the north, this is actually the last one for the Wind River crew. This is the general area of some discussion the last time. The idea of somehow connecting the Bighorn Basin to the rest of the sage-grouse world was explored the last in 2010, but because of the what's now the Bonita Divide, I believe, development, there really wasn't a way to do that. Since these leks have been discovered, 69 word lek, 38 word lek, let's put density up there. Okay, and so it turned it added a lot of color up there, those discoveries. So the proposal was made to join those core areas and create an area of connectivity. But the bird numbers are substantial enough that the recommendation is core. Outside of the Bonita Divide field, and that's been a key. Industry has commented both last week and again last night. And I don't know if they were all from Encana or there were different companies. Different companies.
Actually, yeah.
So we've had two different industry folks say, as you keep the line there, we're okay with this. So that, and what was the tally last night? Consensus unanimous on this to add that. Okay, why don't you just throw up the chapter 33, the callers. I think they're fairly significant in here. This is this was an industry-funded study down here looking at sage-grouse. There have been several papers published on this by folks at Cabling Associates. You're going to see more of Chad Olson's Cabling Associates data here. So these birds were collared, I believe, in the field, but it shows how they use this country.
Yes. Remember he said the annoying thing happened.
Yeah.
It's still.
Thinking it's almost done.
There's a lot of points. He warned me. He did warn me.
Well, I think we're stacking dots on dots now, so we'll, in the interest of time, let's keep trucking here. You got the picture?
Okay, comments on Wind River? Question? All right,
Bates Hole or whatever you got done in that.
Okay, start down on the south end. Start with the north Laramie. Okay, this is the habitat. This is the range map for sage grouse ends right here now, so suggestion of removal of this from both local working group and SGIT map. Proposal came in late last week, day before the SGIT group met, so the local working group did not have a chance to comment on this. This came from Farm Bureau on behalf of landowners in this area to remove this from core. Provided some photos of grasslands in the area. We've since received a slightly revised, and that may reflect here, I'm not sure. It's the same general line, keeping in some of the riparian habitat from the conservation district in the area. But we also have some photos from Google Earth showing some sagebrush in the area. We have sage grouse observations in the area. So again, email discussions within the local working group are questioning whether there's enough data to support the removal. And I think that's also reflective of our discussion last night, that this is just premature. We don't have enough data in here. There's probably at least, there's also some subdivision areas in here. There's probably some areas that could be excised based on habitat and use, but you know, that's just too many grouse to say that there's not, and we have, again, Google Earth images of sagebrush on the landscape, that we need to get more information on what this really looks like on the ground and what potential changes could happen. So consensus at this point, not to accept this revision, but not rejecting it out of hand, that it doesn't have some merit, but there's more information needed.
So revisit that one next time around.
Okay, moving over here, this is the Arlington Elk Mountain area, I-80, going through here. There we go. I'm trying to, my mind is a blank right now. What stream course is this?
Medicine Bow River.
Medicine Bow River. Okay, we've been here before in 2010. This line was drawn after some major negotiations with Arch Coal. A little bit of tweaking in the local bylaws and Arch in here, very minor, and kind of have agreement on where that line is within the between bylaws and Arch Coal and this group too. Very, minor. The big picture, Wild Earth Guardians made a proposal to add this larger area back into core. The local working group and the SGIT subgroup were in, I think, unanimous consent not to do that, based on flex, none, limited use, interstate, limited habitat, and the coal issue in here. So unanimous recommendation not to add that. Separate proposal, this is the Elk Mountain Wind project area. Proposal from those folks to remove this area from core based on valid and existing rights, based on a wind permit that they have for at least a portion of this area. That dates back to 1999, I believe. Public comment from an adjacent landowner relative to power line routes. I'm guessing we'll hear specifics on that in a bit, so I won't go into that in detail. The consensus within the local working group, -1, so majority -1 was not to include that or accept that recommendation to remove the one member's said valid and existing rights should be considered. Last night, the was unanimous not to remove that based on things you're going to hear, I think, in a minute in terms of what's going to happen with the power. This entire area does not appear to have a permit based on the paperwork we have been provided, and the issue of Swiss cheese, even though it would connect down here to non-core. Let's see. Yeah, I think that that summarizes that. And I think that was that it? Was that all that we needed to?
I'm gonna back out and double check, but I think so.
It was 11:45 at this point, or excuse me, 10:45 at this point last night.
Okay, comments on Bates Hall? Question? Go ahead, I can see you clear, I can't see who it is.
Yeah. Ryan Fitzpatrick, no, step out like Biller also. I'm with Wyoming Wind and Power, it's the parent company for Elk Mountain Wind LLC, and I'll make the comment very brief. I'd like to take advantage of the opportunity to speak in front of the group, and I plan to do that through the process about this project. And based on the brief discussion late last night about this project, it's become very apparent to me that I had a difficult time focusing conversation on the case related to valid existing rights, existing uses that are in place on this project, and how that relates to what's stated in the executive order. The conversation through both the majority of the local working group and also the conversation last night gravitated towards a perceived inability of our company, I suppose, to route a generation tie line using the protocols established by the executive order, which take into consideration input from stakeholders, most notably landowners and the SGIT. So the decision has kind of been rendered based on that perceived inability to get that developmental step done, which is a step down the line. That step has not been ignored in our proposal, given that we did a DDCT analysis on two very preliminary generation tie line routes that would follow existing disturbances through core, but at the same time, it is very preliminary, and it's not necessarily part of the proposal. There's no basis to remove those generation tie line routes from core. That's why we didn't include the request to remove those from core. So we had a tough time focusing the conversation on the valid existing rights within the project area, and as opposed to the generation tie line, which would plug us into the Pacific Core system, for which we have transmission capacity reserved through the Public Utility Regulatory Powers Act. That's how we secure power purchase agreement with the Pacific Core. And to kind of give an example of why the generation tie line is a separate issue, and this is through our proposal and pictures that we provided through the proposal, we've shown a substation that's on our project site. Substation is actually plugged into Tri-State's transmission system through carbon power line. And for a very nutshell summary of the Public Utility Regulatory Powers Act and how it relates to this project, public utilities have a must-buy requirement, essentially, for wind farms that are under 80 megawatts. So what we're proposing right now is that this project should not have been removed, or should not have been included in core area to begin with, based on the valid existing rights that were acknowledged during the discussion last night. And there could be an option. This isn't a plan that we this isn't an action that we plan to take through this process, but there could be an option to execute a Public Utility Regulatory Powers Act contract with Tri-State and get that done in the next couple months. Fire generators that are already on site, they're standing, and have an existing, under the existing permit that we already have, and be able to sell power without having to build a generation hub using the existing infrastructure. I mean, that's a possibility. That's just an example for why a secondary process does not necessarily relate to the case that we have made. And it seems like the decisions that have come down have been really focused on that secondary process, which has been acknowledged in our proposal. So I just wanted to say that I plan to take any opportunity I can to present our case and try to refocus it. But I appreciate the opportunity.
Thank you, Ryan.
Go ahead.
Eric Mulbar with Wilders Guardians, and we really support wind power development as a good alternative to fossil fuels, but it has to be put in the right place. And stage gas core areas are not the right place. This core area here in this case has been on the book since 2008, and it's no surprise to anybody that it's been there. I don't know about the valid existing rights and permits, but in 2009 we put out a report called Wind Power in Wyoming Doing It Smart from the Start with my old organization. We mailed that to every permittee in the state, so they would have known that this was an area that shouldn't be developed for wind. I think that, as proposals come forward for wind power in core area, that the firm line ought to be the firm line, what's in the executive order, and everybody ought to play according to the same rules.
Thank you.
Go ahead, Kayla.
I'm Kaylin Palm, and excuse me, we own the High Island Ranch, which is where the proposed transmission corridor for Elkbound Maintenance Project is placed. And I just want to reiterate that they do not have an easement with us. We have never been in any discussions. We have never been contacted for discussions prior to any of this proposal being submitted to you. Also, as was stated very clearly last night, there is about close to 30% of this project boundary is not covered by the conditional use permit that they keep citing as their existing permit. Another thing that I heard last night, and I'm not sure what it was, somebody said something about something being incomplete in that conditional use permit as far as, I don't know the terminology. Something to do with
Stormwater.
Yes, I don't know what that is, but it sounded like there was something incomplete in that I don't know anything about, but that was one more thing. But where they're talking about putting their transmission is maybe to them is not important, but to us it's a very biologically diverse and sensitive area of our ranch, and we're not interested in any development there. And it does say, I think I wrote it probably a little bit better here, but in their biological study that is attached to their proposal, it shows that their entire project area does provide some habitat to the sage grouse during its life cycle. And I think when we're looking, we're on the eve of a potential listing for the sage grouse, so I think any stage of the life cycle of the sage grouse for habitat at this point is important. And I didn't really want to go into this, but I'm just going to say that that Tri-State Power has said that any and all of their agreements that they may have made with this company in the past have long ago been canceled because of lack of production. So I have to disagree with this long-standing history of electrical production on the place. And just as ranchers, we have been doing everything to follow the best management practices set forth by the state, set forth by the federal government to try to keep the sage grouse from being listed. We have escape ramps on every single stock tank on our ranch. There's not one that doesn't have an escape ramp. We have deferred grazing so that we are not conflicting with the LECs. We've done everything that we've educated ourselves a lot. There's a lot of stuff we didn't know about that we do now, and we are definitely grazing our cows and running our operation, keeping the sage grouse in mind and trying to prevent And, you know, anything within our power, we are free to try to prevent listening. And so I think that this is not the time to carve out a little spot on the other side of the fence for what appears to me to be a pretty tenuous proposal. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments? Yes?
I'm Bruce Lawson. I'm a member of the Bates Hole Shirley Basin Local Working Group. I just want to reiterate that when we met and received this proposal, we were one vote short of a consensus to not remove this from the core. There's a number of things we questioned. One is whether their claim for valid and existing rights really does cover that entire project area. But foremost in our mind was what impact the transmission corridor power lines would have on grouse if this project is removed from the core. And in the proposal that they provided, it was really sketchy where those corridors really were. They didn't have even identified on their maps in the legend or title block that they were even power line routes, and I had to question them on that. And what finally came out of that is, in order to connect this project, if they were to build turbines there, to an existing power line corridor, they're going to have to come off of that block through all of those red and yellow dots that you can see. I think that preferred route they want would, our concern, it would greatly impact very good habitat that their wildlife biologists provided that would include important brood-ring habitat. And, you know, we would reconsider this at a later date, you know, 5 years down the road when we meet to address this again, but we want to see a complete package, our local working group. We want to see a complete package. We want to know where those power lines will be located and what impact power lines will have on grass.
Thank you.
Can I do two clarifications?
Oh, Lyndon's ahead of you.
And I'll just be very brief. When we, maybe this afternoon, when we get into the executive order, I think we maybe need to have some conversation about valid and existing rights and what that means. Because I think it means something different.
You are correct. We have had that discussion before, and we will go back to it again. So that's a good point. Yes.
That's actually one of the points I want to address. It was stated that the group acknowledged the valid and existing rights here by the spokesperson. That was not the case. We acknowledged the claim of valid and existing rights. We did nothing to examine them. And for years now, we have been saying that when you present a wind project, when it's presented without the transmission footprint, it's an incomplete application. So for us to even think about a wind farm without knowing where the transmission is scheduled to go, it's impossible for us to consider because the impacts are profound after the farm itself.
And I would just add to that, and we see that regardless of the project, but if the project is authorized and the power lines aren't considered, it puts us in a hard position, and it may be something that we can't build.
Absolutely. Just quickly in regards to the question about the stormwater permit, that seems to be the nexus to the policy. That given their existing permit, even if it doesn't cover all of that, they can develop their private land, they could do that right now without it appear to be the case, except that the stormwater permit would be the nexus to the executive order.
Okay. All right, folks, we're going to take a break for lunch. Let's be back. If we can do it at 4:45. That's 55 minutes, so don't order the fried chicken. We'll see you back here then.
Yeah, that'd be me. I just